Greetings, I'm Solidus-Skully and welcome back to some more Resident Evil action, so let's crack open a cold one at the bar. Except not really, because Jill's got a job to do and any amount of alcohol would probably make her reflexes a bit loosey-goosey, but what is this? Musical notes? And it's also here where we learn a little something about Jill herself. She's apparently musically talented. I mean, in Resident Evil 2 you can see a guitar nearby her desk and, well yeah. She knows how to play the piano, so let it be known that despite being the daughter of a thief, she does have rather refined taste. So, put the music notes on the piano, and I now present to you an excerpt from the Moonlight Sonata. Let's play. I was gonna clap, but my microphone is kind of precarious at the moment, so, yeah. The war gods are pleased. They open. And, you might be wondering why this mansion has such ostentatious traps, but, let's just say that ties into a certain plot point that I may divulge upon if I get bored, because, yeah, we're in for a pretty large stretch of gameplay, so I might just end up covering what that means. But in the meantime, look to your left, the right. I swear I know directions, I'm not totally stupid, but the point is, we're basically to the right of the gardens, so, yeah. That's pretty much where we need to go, because for the majority of this part, there's no cutscenes to distract us this time. It's pretty much all puzzle-solving, gameplay commuting, and, well, really starting to make tracks throughout the mansion. I will say this much, in the second part, we finally ascend to the second floor. Although that's primarily just down to the fact that we finally unlock a few more keys that we need. And of course, that's what the emblem puzzle is gonna help us do. Because again, now that we have the real emblem, put it into the center where we can finally silence that goddamn clock. That's been ticking away, eating away at my sanity. And finally, it shall remain silent. Maybe it's because I've been playing a bit too much Silent Hill 1 recently, but I was half expecting that thing to explode. Just like it did to Harold Mason. But anyway, now we shall bear our reward. And boom, we have a mansion key for mansion people, which does actually bring us to another one of Resident Evil's mechanics, examining items. Yes, not everything is as it seems, and while not used to the extent that later games would have it, yeah, it does make you go out of your way to check items and see if there's a secondary use or identify it a bit more clearly. It was a mansion key, but if you examine what it is on the key label, it's a shield key. And this pretty much gives us our run of the mansion. It allows us to access doors that the lockpick otherwise wouldn't get us through. And yeah, pretty sweet. So, let's go off and do some exploring. Spelunking in the mansion. Oh yeah. So, yeah. Oh, but before we do any of that, I think it's about time we make a stop and see a tiger statue. There are certain uses for gems in this game, and not in the Crash Bandicoot kind of way. Primarily in terms of, well, getting us plot progression or certain ammunition types. You see a tiger, and it can only take one of the two Chaos Emerdoodles. So again, give it the blue gem, and what shall be our reward? Also, if this was Devil May Cry, I'd half expect that thing to turn into a shadow and attack us. Yes, we get another crest, which is pretty much our primary goal at this point. We gotta get all the Crest Emerdoodles! And doing so will allow us to move on to the next area of the game. So again, as I mentioned in the previous part, albeit hopefully a bit less rambly, again, your progression is open, but at the same time you are tied to specific areas, and again, you always know what your end goal objective is for each specific area of the game, and of course, how you know when you're done with a specific area and what you have left to do, so again, Resident Evil has a very clear-cut structure that's, again, really easy to know what you're doing, and, again, by proxy, very easy to navigate. It's all a matter of whether or not you can survive the challenges thrown at you with managing your inventory and supplies, and, well, surviving the horror. And again, like, it's part of the reason why I absolutely fucking cherish Resident Evil 1 specifically. Which I suppose, on that subject, might make you wonder what my thoughts on the remake are, and while I won't get into them fully until we actually get to it, it's pretty much on the same lines of Resident Evil 1, but with extra steps. And that's pretty much all I'm going to say about it for now. I don't think it really detracts from the remake's overall quality, but it does have slight diminishing returns in my eyes. Even though the remake itself is packed with a lot of content and additional features, again, not counting the obvious updated presentation or, you know, any of the modernized 2002 lessons learned in the years since. I know that sounds very conflicting, but again, I do have very conflicting thoughts about the remake. Not in the negative kind of way that you might expect, but, you know, something that does kind of make it detract from my eyes. Well, detract plus add plus... whatever, it's complicated. Whatevers. I'm gonna need some, Windcrest. Well, anyway, I think it's about time we had some trivia. Since this is pretty much going to be a long commute, and since we're in the save room where we first encounter this character, let's talk about support characters. Obviously, Jill has Barry Burton, whom we've seen, but there is one character who, in Jill's scenario, you never see at all, but is still implied to be here. Rebecca Chambers. She's pretty much Chris's support character, and again, when you're playing Chris's scenario, you never see Barry. If you play Jill's, you never see Rebecca, which is something that I would have thought the remake would have fixed, but no, you never see these characters at all. So, just for the sake of padding out for time, who is Rebecca Chambers? Who is this? Well, she's basically a member of Bravo team, 18 years old, and a licensed medical professional. Jesus Christ, that makes me feel like I've wasted my life. I mean, I hadn't had nearly that amount of achievements when I was 18, or even now. So, basically, I suck. But anyway, Rebecca was basically Bravo team's field medic. She was pretty much the cutesy kid sidekick of the team, and basically... well, I don't know, well, at least based on the implications of Resident Evil 0, I don't want to say that she was basically the team's baby, but again, she was very inexperienced, and, well... yeah, I'll get onto that a little bit later, but first it's time for more puzzles. At least something that makes me want to talk about the Saturn version, because again, as you can see, in terms of clothing textures, there's a lot more detail. Color usage is actually a lot more vibrant than what you would have seen on the PlayStation 1. And, yeah, in terms of, like, raw detail and the way in which polygons are rendered, I think the Saturn version does a pretty stellar job. It has a much richer color palette, I find, and it's very soothing. But anyway, back to Rebecca Chambers, yeah. I don't really know what was going on around the mansion, or if maybe, like, there just wasn't a place to put her in Jill's scenario, or if possibly there might have been a certain plot twist. I mean, I'm not gonna say anything for the time being, but someone is a traitor. So I was thinking that, like, maybe, like, one of the characters on the opposite scenario might have been the case, but, no, actually, it's just Rebecca doesn't appear, but she's implied to be with Chris, and whatever. The point is, she survives, and, yeah. And actually, I was doing a bit of research into Rebecca's creation, which was actually quite interesting, because in one of the original drafts of Resident Evil, at least in regards to Jill's characterization, where she was initially planned to be one of 4 playable characters, then sidelined as Chris's support character before having her own story again. Yeah, apparently one of Jill's original personality traits was going to be very similar to that of Rebecca, where she would have been, I don't know, very cutesy in that Japanese anime kind of way. You know, very eager to please, yes sir, let's get to it, jelly and jam time. Until, well, basically, when Jill had her own story, spun off into her own thing, Rebecca was created, and Shinji Mikami initially wanted her cut from the game, because he saw her as a very weak female character, and, well, he was a man who loved his badass ladies, so, yeah. By the way, need I remind you that this is the same man who was directly responsible for writing Ashley Graham, like, several years after the fact. So, yeah, Mikami is quite the confused boy, it seems. But anyway, regardless, I mean, there wasn't really too much that you needed to do in the herb room. Again, you basically used it to get the sword, was it the sword key? I'm pretty sure it was. Either way, I mean, if you were playing as Chris, that's what you would have needed to pretty much access the mansion. Jill can pretty much bypass all those doors except one, which is, well, pretty much our first boss encounter of the game. So yeah, that's really the only reason you need to go there and get the herbicide, to kill the plants, to get the herbs, to get the key. Flibbity bop, wibbity bop. But again, you can't access the 3rd floor until you get the shield key. So again, it is... In terms of, design and structure, Resident Evil 1 is very deliberate in its design, and... I don't know, like, it adds a certain level of replayability, or not replayability, what's the correct term to use? I don't know, it just adds a sense of, like, purposeful structure that really just makes the game really easy to pick up and play. Like, I mean, I think even somebody today could easily settle into Resident Evil 1 in terms of how it flows and functions. I mean, presentation might be a bit of a different story, but I mean, for a lot of the people who say that these games are just too ancient to play, I would disagree. It might take a while to, settle into its classic functionality, but again, I do still think its game design is still pretty top-notch. But then again, I suppose I'm saying this as somebody who is well-versed in these games, but I mean, even in that case, like, I mean... again, if you find the remake easier to settle into, it's really not that different from the original. Like, I mean, the remake does pretty much add certain things, for better or for worse, so... Yeah, I don't know, I don't know, I think it's easy you can settle into this one. But anyway, let's see what's inside this room. And again, if you were playing Chris's scenario, or you used your Barry Burton one-time save in an emergency somewhere else, yeah, this is pretty much where you get the broken shotgun, and that's how you escape the room with the crushing death trap. I wonder who put that there. Must have been a pretty funny joke. Seems that, Oswald Spencer had a funny sense of humor. Well, I mean, I say Oswald Spencer and, a certain subplot, but, yeah, apparently, I don't think that was officially canonized until remake, actually. Although, I mean, it was initially written for this game, so maybe it was in some peripheral materials that might have been Japan exclusive. I don't know. But basically, that was also an example of the small key mechanic that I mentioned previously. Again, if it was Chris, you couldn't access those small desks without getting, like, a small key that would have eaten up a spot in your inventory. Whereas Jill, again, she has a lockpick, doesn't take up an item space, so she can pretty much get the goods immediately. But again, as I was talking about previously with also the character trade-offs, again, they all have certain abilities. Chris is basically, well, he can get headshots easier, he's stronger. I think he might be a bit slower, but again, his trade-off is also that, again, he's got less item space, and he has to use small keys to unlock, well, desks. Jill, on the other hand, more item space. Where exactly those items go, I'm not too sure, but unless they count the cleavage and the buttocks, less said about that the better, I suppose. But again, Jill's trade-off is that, again, she can't take headshots as well, and, she's faster, but a bit weaker health-wise. Because, she's a girl. I'm kidding, obviously, but again, it is one of those variances in gameplay that, does add a lot to your experience, really. Not enough so that playing as one character over the other is going to mean the death of you, but it does make you change up your tactics a little bit. I mean, especially with Chris, you're going to be making a lot more frequent backtrackings towards your item box, but then again, that might also make you prioritize, having one specific weapon, one specific ammo type, over, say, carrying health items around. So again, it does make you rethink your approach, even if slightly, but what is this? We have used the ammo key to unlock the atrium? Or at least, I have no idea what I'm talking about. I don't know, housing design? Though I will say that this mansion is pretty lavishly designed. Oswald Spencer had a lovely taste in mansions. And apparently this commentary's turned into Queer Eye for the Straight Guy. Also reflections. I guess that probably would have been considered like an innovation back in the PS1 days, having like true-to-life reflections. I don't know how they would have pulled it off, or if it would have been considered a tech innovation at the time, although speaking of the PlayStation 1, at least per 1996, I do remember Shigeru Miyamoto, like, praising the PS1's water graphic capabilities. Or at least when it came to, back when Crash Bandicoot was showcased for the upstream levels. I mean, I'm talking about something completely unrelated, but that's primarily because this area of the game doesn't really have much in common with anything until you get New Game Plus, where, yeah, if you go down the hallway and unlock that door, this is where you can pretty much get your unlockable costumes with... One moment, please. And I mean, between PlayStation and Sega Saturn versions, you do actually have very unique costumes between the two. I mean, I think in the PS1 version, Jill, like, has a white variant of her outfit, whereas Chris has, like, the leather jacket you see at the end of his storyline. So yeah, that's about all we have. I might as well talk about ink ribbons now, since we're pretty much just off on the road to nowhere. Yeah, ink ribbons are pretty much your way of saving your game, and you have a limited amount of them, so not only do you have to manage your items and resources, but also the amount of times you can save. Later Resident Evil games, I think maybe the easy mode of the remake, and I think especially the easy mode of the remakes from 2 and 3, yeah, you get unlimited saves, but yeah, in the classic games, no such luck. You gotta manage your saves and make sure not to save too often. Either you are extremely cautious, or you are a coward. And I mean, I can see why people would be a lot more frugal with their ink ribbons, and I mean, especially in the original edition of Resident Evil 1, you did kind of have to ration it out a lot more than what you would have had to have done otherwise, although I think that was more for the American release than anything else, but I'll get into that a bit later. But yeah, later editions, I believe, post the PS1 long box version of Resident Evil 1, yeah, they pretty much re-added the Japanese difficulty and, you know, gave you a few more ink ribbons between you. But I mean, I don't know, I don't think the ink ribbon save system is really something to fret over too much, because, I mean, I guarantee you'll get enough ink ribbons to offset, you know, any amount of times you save, unless you're really that paranoid, and one bit of progress you make, oh, gotta go back and save. Okay, I took another step, oh, gotta go back and save. But again, I mean, if you're skilled at all at managing your resources and items, then you should be pretty okay. I mean, while I did say that Resident Evil 1 is quite similar to Code Veronica in that one mistake can mean your doom, you don't need to worry too much unless, of course, you're, I don't know, completely pissing your resources into the wind, so just keep it sleazy, stay freaky, and for the love of God, don't panic. Don't panic! There are no dogs in this hall anymore, so it just becomes an regular hallway? And I mean, it was a good scare. Perhaps the best. Not really, actually. Maybe that's due to overexposure and, oh, beautiful Jillian Valentine model quality of the Saturn. I mean, comparatively... Well, actually, no, not really. I guess maybe the PC version might have the best graphical quality in terms of, like, having clean models, but I still think the Saturn version is pretty up there. Because, I mean, as you can see on some of the zombies, like, I mean, the clothing textures are a lot more detailed. The facial models, well, a little bit wobbly, as per, you know, 5th generation graphical capabilities. But I don't know, it still looks pretty okay. Although, then again, the graphical quality does degrade the further away models are, based on how some games operated, but I don't know. Saturn version generally looks quite snazzy. I like it. We'll do lunch. But in the meantime, let's do some more sorting with the items. And I mean, yeah, this is pretty much something that you're gonna be doing quite a bit throughout the game, so, yeah, if you're not one for item management, I've actually, to kind of go into some criticisms about classic Resident Evil, I've heard some people actually kind of complain about this, since they claim that it, like, takes a little bit too much pacing out of the gameplay. But I mean, I kind of disagree in that aspect. It's a fundamental part of the game where you have to prepare what you're going to do before you do it. I mean, I guess maybe they're more used to the post-Resident Evil 4 kind of things, where, again, those games prioritize thinking on the fly. Although, I mean, to kind of go into a bit of a Resident Evil 4 tangent, 4 I think is kind of a half step between the old and the new, because, I mean, 4, it wants you to, you know, think on the fly and, you know, be action man in action land, but at the same time, apart from a shift in camera angles, you're still rooted to the same spot and have to precision aim, so it's kind of picking your poison, really. Some would argue that's part of the challenge, but I think that's kinda cap a shit why Resident Evil is a bad game, and you suck for liking it. Oh, yes, I went there, doing the hot takes, wham. I mean, you might say I'm being facetious, but that's only a half-truth. But in any case, now that we have the armor key, we can finally move on to new places. With a mysterious deer watching us, watching us. And yeah, we're going to be exploring the rest of the second floor mansion later. where we might meet up with an old friend who makes me say bravo! Oh, and also, if you're playing as Chris, he pretty much has that lighter as his, special ability! And basically meaning that it doesn't take up an inventory slot and he can access it whenever he wants, but Jill, well, doesn't have that kind of space. Because she needs it for the lockpick. But I mean, apart from that, I'm pretty much going to be concluding this part with a little memorandum from Martin Crackhorn, a scientist, and I figured without my waffling commentary, well, it allows you to get a feel for the game's tone, which, in spite of its very 90s, like, horror B-movie kind of feel, well, again, Resident Evil 1 does have its, grim reminders here and there, so yes, as we explore around this room with an aquarium and, let the bug on the wall. So I guess this room would have made James Marcus very happy. I'm Solidus-Skully. Keep it new metal, and next time on the Resident Evil commentary, we're going to be exploring the rest of the second floor mansion. Catch you dudes and dudettes next time, and I'll see you later. Bye-bye.